All right, in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and get started for today. As I noted when we started, my name is Wendy Zdeb. I'm the Executive Director with the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals, and really happy to have with us today Ted Gardella from the College Board, who has always been fantastic about keeping MASSP members in the loop about whatever the latest happenings are College Board related. So Ted, thanks for being with us this morning. And we also have with us Erin and Steve Carlson from Sandusky Jr. Senior High School. For those of you that don't know the Carlsons, Steve Carlson is the principal at Sandusky, and he is our past president of the association, immediate past president. And then we also have his wife, Erin Carlson, who's a teacher at Sandusky High School. And Erin has been the person that has been running many of the Khan Academy workshops that MASSP has been running. So following Ted's kind of nuts and bolts presentation, we're going to talk with Erin and Steve about what their plans are for testing in the fall and just some things you might want to be thinking about. So that's kind of the two-part of what we're going to be doing today. We've just got a couple of intro slides we want to cover with you. There is a Q&A feature in Zoom. So at the bottom of your screen, if you run your mouse or cursor along there, you'll see that the Q&A will pop up. We will use the Q&A box and be monitoring that. So as Ted is speaking, I'll be watching the Q&A box for your questions. And when Erin and Steve and I are speaking at the end, I'll be monitoring that as well. So the chat is for you to be chatting with each other. But if you specifically have a question for a panelist, you want to put that in the Q&A function. To upvote a question, you can see that if you put your cursor kind of along there, a little thumbs up icon will pop up, and that will make that question rise to the top. So you might want to utilize that if someone has posed a question that you'd really like to hear the answer to. It's our next slide, Rye. We do always just remind you with this little disclaimer that a lot of people view these videos. So we do record this, and of course the panelists realize that they're going to be taped, but also those of you that pose questions, just be mindful of the fact that whatever you ask or post, that may be seen by others. So please just keep that in mind as we work together today in this webinar format. All right, I think we are up and running, and I think we're ready for Ted to start kind of walking us through what was posted in Spotlight. We, Ted and I have had several conversations since the pandemic started, and when we knew that testing wasn't going to happen this spring, we thought, geez, I'd really like to make sure that our kids have the opportunity, especially those that will be seniors in the fall, for that free college entrance exam. And we also wanted to be able to have the continuity of data for many schools that have been testing PSAT 8, 9, and 10 now, to be able to have that information as well. So I think we are fortunate in some ways to get in the executive order that would be funded, and that all schools would be providing that opportunity for students in the fall. Of course, I don't know, maybe some people, but I personally wouldn't have predicted that we would have gone on as long as we have in the current circumstances, and that we're also now looking at how it might impact the fall. So, we fully realize the things that we're going to be talking about today may change over time, and your thinking about fall testing and your plans for fall testing may end up changing if it ends up that we aren't able to open school in the fall and have all students in the building, for example, at the same time. So there's a lot of considerations and moving parts, but we are going to unpack the Spotlight and kind of think about kind of on face value where things are, I guess is the way I would look at it today. But then when I'm speaking with Erin and Steve a little bit later, we'll also be kind of talking about a few of the what ifs, certainly not all of them. So we'll be keeping that in mind as we work together today. So thank you, Ted, for your willingness to kind of step up and walk us through all of the information that was in that Spotlight.
Absolutely. And I think I'll share my screen now. And give me a thumbs up if you're seeing the PowerPoint. Great. And I'll just step through it. As Wendy said, as Wendy pointed out, we've been working, since, as the crisis unfolded, we've been working on the decision to drop the spring testing. And then after the governor's executive order, we've been working closely with MDE to determine what a fall implementation would look like. As Wendy pointed out, what we're sharing today is as of today's date. So this is the information that we know as of May 20th, 2020, 10:07 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'll give you the nuts and bolts, and we will actually go to the MDE website and do a little bit deeper unpacking. So the goal is, of course, to share the latest information. We're going to continue to work with the Michigan Department of Education to continue to finalize the implementation details. And as more information becomes available, it will always be shared through Michigan MDE's website and, most importantly, through Spotlight. So as we go through this summer, normally we'd be done with the testing season by now, and maybe you wouldn't be paying as much attention to Spotlight as you might in the weeks and months before testing season. But it is really going to be critical that you pay attention to the document and especially any links they put through. And that's what they did on May 14th, is they actually linked to the state plan at this point. The health and safety of educators and students is the first concern for the College Board. We will continue to analyze potential impacts of the crisis on any policies and procedures for fall testing, and we'll continually make you aware of any updates as they become available. Really appreciate all of the work and support that Michigan educators have done around the advanced placement program. What we're trying to do this year to make sure that opportunities continue to be extended to students through advanced placement is unprecedented, but we couldn't do that without all the work and support of educators. And again, Spotlight is going to be the most critical source of information on all state testing. So let's click over to some general information. MDE will be funding a fall 2020 administration of the SAT with essay for students who are entering the 12th grade in fall 2020. Those were 11th graders in spring 2020, and they would have taken the SAT with essay in April. We will be offering the PSAT NMSQT for students who are in the 11th and 10th grade in fall 2020. Now, the PSAT NMSQT is the exact same test as the PSAT 10. It's just a different form, and they're offered at different times of the year. The PSAT NMSQT, because of our relationship with the National Merit Scholarship Organization, it is offered only in the fall. PSAT 8-9 will be used for students entering 9th grade in fall 2020. So as you can see, the students who were in grades 8 through 11 in the spring will be covered with a fall testing as they are grades 9 through 12. So the results of fall testing will not be used for any accountability reporting. And really, this is to offer the opportunity to students to take the assessments, as Wendy said, offering the college entrance exam to those who are entering 12th grade, and then providing for that continuity of data. All of the schools that were established to participate in the spring of 2020 are expected to administer the assessments in the fall. Now, the one caveat there might be if your school is building new grades. So perhaps you were established for grades 8 and 9 in the spring, and next year when school opens, you will have grades 8, 9, and 10. You will be able to become established for grade 10. But if schools in general were not established, they cannot just enter into the fall testing administration under the state's funding. All schools will be required to order the test materials directly through the College Board test ordering site, what we call TOS or TOS. Pre-ID labels will not be available for the fall Michigan provided assessments, so students will have to bubble in the required information on their answer sheet. And more on that a little bit later. So for the grade 12 students in fall of 2020, schools will administer the SAT with essay. And you'll have the option of choosing two different primary test dates. One is in September, so you could choose to administer the SAT with essay to 12th graders on September 23rd as your primary test date, or October 14th as your primary test date. Both of those two test dates will have a 2-week accommodated testing window. So students with accommodations on the SAT with essay can test anytime from September 23rd through October 6th for the September 23rd date, or from October 14th to October 27th for the October 14th date. But both of those primary testing dates will have a makeup test date of October 28th. So for a student who misses the primary test date on either one of those, they will take a makeup test on October 28th.
Hey, Ted.
Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you if you put your slides into presentation mode, then they'll see it full. There's kind of seeing.
Okay, there you go.
Perfect, thank you. And then we do have some questions, so whenever you want to pause, keep going.
Let's get through SAT and then we'll stop and answer those questions.
Okay.
So public and non-public schools are eligible to participate in the fall administration if they were established for spring 2020. So, there may be some private schools that didn't want to participate in the MME. And now that there's no other tests other than the College Board assessments, they might want to participate in the fall. If they were not established to participate in the spring, they cannot be established for the fall. Students who are going to participate in this test must be in the 12th grade. The essay is required, and it is a paper pencil assessment, and the test books must be returned after testing. And you'll order your makeup tests in exactly the same way that you would have in the spring. Day after the primary test date, you'll get an email, and it will ask how many makeup forms that you need. So you'll use the materials that you order for accommodations during that 2-week accommodated testing window, but you will not provide a makeup test using those forms. So I'll stop there, Wendy, if there are some questions specifically about SAT.
Yes. So these are some things that you and I have already been talking about, Ted, so not surprising. Steve Clark is asking, if we're in a half capacity situation, how are we supposed to meet this testing expectation? And, as we noted at the start of this, we realize that this is going to be a fluid situation. It's going to be challenging if that ends up being the case. And already, obviously, we saw yesterday that West Bloomfield schools, for example, announced that they'll be on a Monday, Tuesday for half of their students, and then Thursday, Friday for the other half. And so, and also thinking about social distancing and things of that nature. There's definitely a lot of moving parts with this. And I'm assuming, Ted, that these discussions are going on at the College Board in terms of potential flexibility.
There's certainly a lot of conversations with MDE. I think, and Steve, it's a great question. I think that as more schools publicize their plans for the fall, it will give a more robust background to any further conversations. So again, these are the decisions and these are the policies and procedures that we have as of today. And I think that, as you said, things are going to continue to change. And so it would be important to make note of anything that comes out in Spotlight.
So another thing that a lot of talk has been going on is, are these assessments optional? And one of the things that, I think is important for us to go back to is, what was stated in the executive order in terms of providing students with the opportunity to test. And so obviously we have a situation where you do not have to hit a participation rate, for example. You're not going to be using these for accountability in terms of, your school report card. It would be optional if a district was using this data for teacher evaluation, for example. But that all being said, Ted, how would you kind of define that idea of, is it required or not?
I think the best guidance is from the executive order, and also as it's been noted in Spotlight, even though it's not using the results for accountability, the expectation is that schools will offer all of the grades. That's been our conversation throughout all of the planning, and so we have not, heard the word optional at all. So we've heard, this is the expectation that all schools will offer all of the grades of testing. But as you noted, it's not, there's not going to be a participation mark, and it will not be used for accountability.
So if people are asking follow-up questions like, could there be an opt-out and things of that nature, I think that those really are things that would have to be addressed, potentially by MDE or by the school district.
Yeah, I think the department is going to need to provide any of the talking points on that. I know that in all of our conversations, it's just been the expectation that the test will be offered.
Right. Okay. So will the test, the PSAT 10, be the NMSQT and qualify students for national merit, or would students have to test twice?
So why don't we go ahead and go through the PSAT and MSQT details, and then we'll hit any further questions on that.
Okay, let me jump down to a specific SAT question then.
Sure.
Because I saw one. Hold on, where did it go? If you have two high schools in the same district, so similar to when I was in Rochester and we had Rochester High, Stony Creek, and Adams, do those schools have to administer the SAT on the same day?
No, actually, it's a school-based decision. So this is one of the questions that has come up prior to, and we've asked the SAT program. So schools will choose the date. So it could be that in a district that has multiple high schools, they could give the SAT on the 23rd, and then in another building on the 14th. However, they cannot split students within a school. So you can't take the students from one school and split them into the two different dates.
Okay, so what about the essay portion? Many colleges don't require the essay. Some obviously do. Is there a reason that, or could schools choose to have their 12th graders just take the SAT only without the essay portion?
So we'll talk about that when we get to the ordering procedures, but MDE will not fund an SAT without the essay. So in order to qualify for the funding from MDE, they must administer the SAT with essay.
Okay. How about accommodations for the SAT? If accommodations were applied for and approved for SAT spring testing, would those need to be resubmitted for fall?
No. Well, I'm not going to get too deeply in accommodations because we are going to do a full webinar. So the College Board is going to do a full administration webinar as soon as we have a few more details. And we're going to cover a lot more information about accommodations and also about the test ordering system. I'll just touch on that today. We're not actually going to go into the test ordering system because we can't. But, and we'll talk about the difference between 9th grade, 10th and 11th grade, and then 12th grade. But if your 10th, 11th, and 12th graders were in the College Board accommodation system, they do not have to be re-entered unless their accommodation needs have changed. So the big thing here is, and we'll talk about this, the big thing really is 9th grade, because those students were 8th graders last year. They may have been in a different building. They may have had a state allowed accommodation. And those will not transfer year over year. So anyone who had a state allowed accommodation, those will not be used for the fall administration. But again, I would stay tuned to Spotlight for more details. And then when we announce the webinar where we'll cover accommodations, we'll answer a lot more questions at that one.
Fair enough. Okay, one last one, and then we'll keep going. So someone asked about how quickly results will be in, and I'm going to put in the Q&A section the fall 2020 list of important dates from Spotlight, because I think what we're going to see is that we'll actually get results more quickly than in the past, because they don't need to go into the BAA secure site.
There's two things to note. So there won't be any answer sheet verification as there normally is, and that's one of the things that delays score reporting. So you're right. These scores are going to be back much more quickly, with the exception of PSAT and NMSQT, because those scores have to go through the NMSQT process. So that will be later than the SAT and the PSAT 8-9.
Thank you.
Sure. And as you said, we'll cover that when we get to the MDE site. So let's talk about grades. Oh, I'm sorry. Were there any other SAT questions, Wendy?
Nope.
Okay. So fall 2020 for grades 10 and 11, they will administer PSAT and NMSQT. There are actually 3 possible dates that you can choose, but the dates that will be funded by the state are the October 14th or the October 28th date, and you must choose either date, and once you choose those dates, you must test both grades on that date. So there is a Saturday administration, but the October 17th Saturday administration is not part of the funded MDE administration. Any 11th grader who takes the PSAT and NMSQT will be considered for national merit. So there are some policy differences, though, and it will be really important once we get to the testing season and we get the coordinator manuals out. Be really important that you pay attention to the coordinator manuals on this. These are the national coordinator manuals. They are not going to be Michigan specific, and you must follow the procedures that are in there. There is no makeup date for PSAT and NMSQT. So if a student misses the date that you choose to administer it, they cannot take the PSAT and NMSQT. There is no makeup date. Both 10th and 11th grade students must be tested on the date that you choose. There is no accommodated window. There is, however, the possibility that a student has a 2-day accommodation. And so that would mean that a student would take the test over October 14 and 15 or October 28 and 29. But there is no window for PSAT and NMSQT. Only those schools who are eligible to participate in the fall administrations, or who were eligible to participate in the spring administrations, will be established for the fall. So in other words, you had to be established in the spring for grades 9 and 10 in order to administer grades 10 and 11 in the fall. And if schools were not a part of the MME process, they weren't established, they cannot now just come in and take just PSAT and NMSQT. So they must be established for the spring administration. It is a paper pencil assessment. These test booklets do not have to be returned. These test booklets can be stored securely and then distributed to students once the scores are released, which should signal to everyone that the grades, the PSAT and NMSQT for grades 10 and 11 will be a released form of the test. And so the question analysis report that you'll receive with the scores will be the one where you can investigate the item level data. Do you want to stop there and see about questions for PSAT and NMSQT? Because 8-9 is probably a little bit longer.
A lot of our questions are actually about PSAT 8-9, but
Okay.
well, and this is kind of a generic question. Is there a virtual testing system being developed? I know that the College Board has had this in the works, and you've actually done piloting on it.
Right. So, and that's what we'll talk about with PSAT 8-9. We do have a digital option. It is a digital page turner. It is not a digital adaptive test. And it's been used in a number of other states, most notably, I think, Rhode Island and Delaware and Ohio use a digital option. And I believe that state that just recently came on is going, oh, I think Indiana is going to be all digital for their SAT. So we do have that option. It is not the same as the engine that you use for MSTEP, but we'll talk about that with 8-9 because that is an option for the 8-9 test. Great.
That's really the only thing we had related to that.
Okay. So let's go in and unpack 8-9. Lots of flexibility here. There is a very, very long window for fall PSAT 8-9. And so you can choose any date between September 21st and October 28th to administer the PSAT 8-9 to 9th graders. Now, the window extends until March. However, if you expect the department to fund your testing, it must be done between September 21st and October 28th. And there are implications in terms of ordering deadlines with all of that. Now, with PSAT 8-9 for grade 9, there will be a 2-week window for accommodated and makeup testing. So in other words, you'll choose a date, that will be your primary test date, and then you'll have 2 weeks to administer any makeups or any accommodated tests during that window. Again, public and non-public schools who are eligible to participate in the fall for grade 8, if they were established for grade 8 in the spring, they will be able to test grade 9 in the fall. Students must be in grade 9 to participate. Test books will be needed to be stored securely, and then they can be distributed to students once scores are released. And schools can choose the digital testing option for fall 2020. Now, you will not be able to choose the digital option for spring testing. So if you do decide to do the digital testing in fall 2020, you should note, we do not use the DRC Insight portal or platform. You can find out more information about our digital testing at the website that's listed. And again, it will not be offered for spring assessments. All the spring assessments will be paper pencil. However, if you do want to try the digital platform that we offer, you can. There's some additional work that must be done. There's an upload that has to be done. The platform is different, and accommodations are handled a bit differently in the digital platform. So I'll stop there. We'll answer any specific questions. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and go on here, but I can answer any specific questions about 8-9.
So Ted, someone asked, you just mentioned, and I know you didn't want to get too deep into accommodations, but is there going to be an online version for those requiring audio?
Yes, there will be, the same streaming audio that we offered for spring testing.
Okay. So some other questions about 8-9, and I think you may have referenced this, but if you wanted to continue to offer PSAT 8-9 to incoming 8th graders, can we arrange it with this testing cycle, or do we need to order and administer that test as a completely separate testing event?
You will order it in the test ordering system, but obviously the district would be paying for that. And you'll have much more flexibility because the entire window is open to you for 8th grade because you're paying for that. But no, you can order it. Each grade is actually a different piece. So we will be invoicing the state for grades 9, 10, 11, and 12. And then if you order 8th grade through the test ordering system, we would invoice your district directly for that.
So just to be clear, there is not funding for 8th graders in the fall. The funding is for 9th graders to be taking the PSAT 8-9.
That's correct. The students who will be 8th graders this fall would have been 7th graders in the spring. And so they wouldn't have been tested under the state's program.
Great. Okay. I think that hit those. If any others come up, I'll come back.
Great. So there's some very, very important differences between fall and spring. And, Wendy and I have discussed that this fall is going to be, obviously with the return to school and all the different procedures, it's going to be pretty hectic. And we will have to turn our attention back to spring procedures very quickly. So it's going to be important to note the differences between the two administrations. For the fall of 2020, we will not use the secure site. What that means is you will not pre-ID students and you will not get labels for the fall. We will only use the educational entity master once. So I'll tell you more about that. We're going to pull from the educational entity master to send out the access codes that are needed for our test ordering system. If you've already ordered for fall, if you've done that before, you've already used the test ordering system, you've already been in it, you won't need an access code. But if you've never ordered fall tests, or if you've never ordered for grades other than those tested in the spring, you would not be in the College Board test ordering system, and you'll need an access code. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. So we're only going to use the Educational Entity Master once to send out the access codes. Then once the test ordering system opens, we will pull all needed communication information from our test ordering system. So in the fall, you will need to go in and identify test staff. That means test coordinators, principals, verify your school address in the test ordering system. You will order all standard and accommodated test materials, and you'll get all tracking information from the test ordering system, or TOS. We will be using SSD online for the SAT with SA and PSAT and NMSQT. Why isn't PSAT 8-9 listed there? Because in the fall, accommodations for 9th graders are locally determined. That means you do not need to enter accommodations for the 9th grade. You can simply order accommodated materials and provide the needed accommodations. Now, the reality is, if you're doing 9th grade, those students were 8th graders, and they were probably in the system as 8th graders. However, they might have been in the system with state-allowed accommodations, and those do not transfer from year to year. Again, you don't need to really hurry up and put in accommodations for 9th graders, because you don't have to have them for the fall testing. You will need them for the spring testing, but I want to assure folks, because I know they're going to get worried about the summer and, what do I have to get done before August and so forth. You do not have to put in accommodation requests in SSD Online for the 9th grade for the fall. You'll use all College Board websites for fall 2020. Now, let's turn our attention to that other column, spring 2021. This is what's very familiar to us all. This will be, our 5th time doing spring testing in 2021. We will use the secure site because we will pre-ID students. There will be an answer sheet documentation or answer document verification window, and there will be an additional material order window in the spring. We will use the Educational Entity Master for all test staff information and school addresses. The two systems do not communicate with each other. In other words, we can't take what you've entered into the TOS system, the test ordering system for fall testing, and transfer that into the EEM for spring testing. So you're going to need to verify information twice this year, once for our test ordering system and then once for the EEM. We will not order test materials for the spring tests. Just as you have been doing for the last 5 years, you'll pre-ID students, you'll put your information into the SSD system, and that's what will be used to generate all of the orders. So those are the big differences between fall and spring. And what I'd like to do now, if I may, is just go over to the MDE website. And so this is the Michigan Merit Examination website. And so what you'll see is the link that was provided in Spotlight. So this top link under the What's New button has the fall 2020 school day testing information. And this is the link that was in the May 14th Spotlight. So if you look at the May 14th Spotlight, you'll see this short blurb on the front page. This link takes you right to this site here.
Hey,
and
Ted,
you can actually download this. Yep, sure.
hey, Ted, you might have to minimize your PowerPoint screen, and because no one's
Gotcha.
we can only see your slides still.
Okay, let's do this. And then I'll make sure on sharing. Let me stop the sharing and then reshare. Thanks, Brian. I was flipping there and didn't do it on the share. So let's try this. Are we good now with the MDE website?
The fall 2020 school day testing document?
Yes. Yep. Little leaves up at the top. Okay. So this was the link from the May 14th Spotlight. It's got a lot of great information here. We've covered most of it. Students who were in spring 2020 who are in grade 8 will be in grade 9. They'll take the PSAT 8-9. You have the option of paper or online. The other 3 grades, 10, 11, and 12, are all paper pencil. And we've covered all of these except the ordering information in here. So this is what's really important. So once you choose your test date, you then have an ordering window. So the test ordering system is actually going to open June 2nd. So if you've already been in the test ordering system, maybe you've ordered for fall, or maybe you ordered other grades for spring, so you're familiar with the test ordering system, you can go in as of June 2nd. If you've never used the test ordering system, though, you'll have to wait for your access code. And those will be emailed the first week in June. We expect them to be in schools by June 9th. If you're really, assertively wanting to get in test ordering system, I believe we'll be able to give you your access codes earlier than that. And I think, Wendy, that we had planned on possibly doing a follow-up webinar on the test ordering system once it opens in June. Here's the important deadlines for accommodations. The accommodations deadline for the September 23rd testing is August 7th. But again, if those students were in 11th grade and had an accommodation already in the system that was a College Board accommodation, not a state allowed accommodation, then they can use those accommodations, and you really don't need to worry about this deadline as long as they were in the system with a College Board accommodation. If they were in the system with a state allowed accommodation, those will not be used in the fall. And so you'll have to determine whether or not there are other accommodations that might be helpful for those students. The pre-administration materials will come to schools in this time frame from the 8th to the 10th. Test materials would be in the schools 9/15 to 9/17 if you choose the September 23rd deadline. And here are all the other dates that we've talked about. As Wendy said, you'll get your SAT information back very quickly. So if you choose the September 23rd test date, you'll get the scores in the portal on the 15th of October. Students will get the scores in their College Board accounts on the 16th of October. And then similarly for the October 14th date, you would get scores in the educator portal on the 6th of November. Students would have access on the 9th of November. So lots of great information in here. Again, this is as of May. So without better information about fall school schedules, I think MDE may make some changes to this once they hear about that. The important bullet here is that there are no state allowed accommodations. So for example, math only testing is a state allowed accommodation. Testing with sign language is a state allowed accommodation. Those will not be offered for the fall. And any English language learner students who were approved for 50% extended time in spring 2020 would have to be re-entered for fall 2020. So again, lots of great information on this link. This is the PSAT and NMSQT. We've covered all of this except for the ordering deadline. So the ordering window would be from June 2nd to September 16th. And I want to stress that anything that you do early on, let's say you go in June and get your preliminary order done, you can update your order all the way up till September 16th. So you can make changes, you can add accommodated forms, you can do all of that up until September 16th of 2020. Let's see, yes, all accommodations have to be in, and I believe, yes. Okay, there is no accommodated testing window, so we've got that. This is the PSAT 8-9 primary test date. Your ordering window is from 6/2 to 9/16. And then, of course, the testing window is September 21 through October 28th. And as we mentioned, these deadlines for the ordering, that September 16th is the hard deadline. You can make any changes up to the 16th. And then we do have the digital. And so on the MDE website, if you want to learn more about digital testing and the way our platform works, there's a link to our digital testing webpage. It tells you about the different requirements. It is a very different platform from the DRC Insight platform. And in this case, you would have to submit a bulk registration file in order to get students into the testing platform. I want to note that offsite testing is going to be allowed. We just do not have the procedures complete yet. So we will have more information about offsite testing as well coming up. And then there's information about accommodations. But again, our webinar is probably going to be more important than any preliminary information I could give you. I do want to mention that one of the most important pieces, I think, for fall testing is going to be the issue of parental consent. For the PSAT and NMSQT and for the SAT, there is the optional student data questionnaire and the student search service opt-in. That's available for students. And we really think that in order for students to get the most opportunities, the most attention from scholarship organizations, that these two pieces are going to be very, very important for the class of 2021. That being said, with the federal guidance, you do need to get some sort of parental consent. So it needs to be consistent with your district policies, but there are forms available for district consent. So I just want to quickly click over to that. So as we look at the MME site, under what's new, you had that link for all the information, but right under that is a consent form that you can use to secure parental consent. So it has a lot of information for parents, so you can use this and send it to parents, helps them understand what those two items are, the search and then the student questionnaire. And then I think it's just really important for them to note that this is where students get matched to scholarship opportunities. And I know that, you know, we've talked a lot about the changes that are coming in college admissions, but for college scholarships, it's still very important that students are involved in student search and then fill out that optional student data questionnaire. Pre-administration is going to be very different for fall testing because you won't have labels. So you will have to schedule a pre-admin session for those students to fill out their answer sheets. And it would be a great idea to be able to have their parental consent so that they can fill out their student questionnaire at the same time. So let me stop sharing that.
Hey, Ted, we have a couple of questions about consent. A lot of people did collect those forms, you know, for spring testing. If they still have those for the kids in the fall, could they just use those consent forms or do they have to redo them?
That's a great question, Wendy. It's probably one that's best determined by your district policy and what your consent letter said. So, you know, that's not one that the College Board can answer. It depends on your district policy. I would say better safe than sorry. And, you know, take a look at the consent form from MDE, make sure that it's consistent with your district policy, and then operate in that form.
So, you know, so you and I had talked about this and Steve Carlson actually and I discussed this too. You know, in a lot of cases, when schools have kind of like their back to school packet and you'll have your military opt out or opt in, you know, in different forms like that in terms of for students. So someone was asking, can we use an opt out for the consent form?
Again, that's not something that the College Board can answer. That's you know, determined by district policy, and you know, that's something probably that the association can do a lot better job of answering than I can.
So, you know, this question I've heard come up and actually seen like a lot of people posting about it online, you know, and even, you know, somewhat related a little bit to everything going on with advanced placement as well. What feedback are you hearing from colleges and universities? Because, you know, as you know, many are saying that they weren't going to worry about, you know, college entrance scores for this class. And what do you think that is going to happen with that moving forward?
Boy, it's a great question, and you know, obviously the landscape's going to continue to shift as we move forward. We've been very, very pleased with the reactions of colleges and universities to our AP program. Again, it really is unprecedented, and the resources that we've put together to offer online at home AP. My son took his AP psych test yesterday, so we've been, nervously waiting to make sure that he did everything correctly, just as many other parents are doing. I think it's still going to be an open question, but I will say this, Wendy, there's a difference between admissions decisions and placement and scholarship decisions. So we're hearing that there's going to be a lot of flexibility for the class of 2021 with respect to test scores for admissions. Not sure that that will continue. We don't know. But what we can say with confidence is that test scores are needed for scholarship decisions and placement decisions. So I think it's important for folks to note that, getting into college is one thing. At a certain point, students who get their admissions decision for the college of their dreams, eventually their mind turns to, well, how am I going to afford this? How am I going to remain persistent and complete my degree? So I think it's important that we look at all phases of the college experience, and that's not just admissions. That's merely the first step.
Sorry, had myself muted there. The lawn crew just showed up here at my house. Apparently, that was a good idea. So one of the questions that people had, you did talk about this, and it is in the MDE materials, but I do think that, it just can't hurt to just provide a little more clarification again. So if everything, the kids rolled in the fall and we were testing, we would be testing 9th graders paid for by the state using the PSAT 8-9 test. We would be testing 10th graders using PSAT 10, or is that using PSAT NMSQT test?
PSAT NMSQT. And that is the exact same test as the PSAT 10. It's just a different form.
Okay.
So both 10th and 11th graders will take PSAT NMSQT.
Okay. And I think we talked about this, similar with PSAT 8-9, there's a different norm for each grade level.
Correct.
Okay.
There are benchmarks for each grade level. So there's a 10th grade benchmark for PSAT and NMSQT.
Okay, great. All right, those are all the questions that were in the queue.
Okay, well that was, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from Erin and Steve about their plans. And I will hang around if there are any questions that pop up.
Okay, fantastic. So, kind of what I think MASSP always tries to do is, we want to provide you with the information, kind of the nuts and bolts of what you need to know, but then also to help you kind of process and think about things. So I asked Steve Carlson and his wife, Erin, who's an English teacher, to join us today because I think they bring the unique perspective of both, obviously, how is this going to work in terms of data for our whole school, but then also from the classroom perspective from Erin. So Steve, if we're talking about that testing schedule and you're thinking about your dates for the fall, once again, on your best information of kids walking in the doors in the fall, not thinking about a potential change in schedule and only having half your kids and social distancing and all that, what kind of is your initial thought about what your testing schedule might look like?
Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, and obviously we need to go into this with some assumption of what things might look like, and it's been stated up and down in this webinar that we can't be sure, and so plans may well have to adjust. But it would be my goal to test each of these 4 grade levels as early as possible. We always use the College Board testing results as the key piece to determine what's been the impact of our instruction and what curricular decisions might we need to make. And then once we are able to use, the College Board tests as part of that information about the impact of our curriculum and our instruction, we use it to tweak our curriculum and instruction. That's important to us every year. And I think if anything, it's going to be more important in the fall because we're essentially, despite all the noble and valiant efforts of educators across the country, students will have had essentially like a 5.5 month summer slide that we're going to have to try to measure what achievement gaps have occurred, and then we got to build up as best we can. So all things being equal and not spending a whole lot of time right now worrying about what fall might look like in terms of number of students in the building, I would be attempting, and I'm a 712 building, knowing that every time I test any grade in my building, it has some disruption on every other grade in my building. I would be looking to see if I could test my 9th graders and my 12th graders both on September 23rd. Again, could be a million variables as to why maybe I can't, but I know under normal circumstances, I could handle testing 2 grade levels at one time in my building. If I can test them both on September 23rd, and obviously I'm choosing September 23rd because that is one of the 2 dates I can use to test the 12th graders, and it fits within the 9th grade window, then I know I'm going to have minimal impact on the instruction of the rest of my students. And obviously instructional time is going to be very key come fall. And then I would seek to test grades 10 and 11 both on October 14th. Reasons for this mindset for me are very simple. Try to do testing over as few days as possible to minimize disruption to the building and to get results as quickly as we can so we can get to work analyzing where we're at grade levels, where we're at within departments, and what we need to do to try to boost our students back up.
So Steve, I know, if you're putting on your parent hat right now that you've got a senior that's, well, a soon to be senior that's going to be under your roof right now. What are you thinking about in terms of, Matt, your own son, being able to test as, a senior and he didn't get his junior year paid for test by the state? Is that part of your thought process of doing that first date available for seniors?
Absolutely, and Erin and I have always taken the approach: if it's good for our kids, we think it's good for everyone's kids and everyone's students. Under normal circumstances, all the juniors in the state would have taken the SAT with essay on, I think it was April 14th. And by now, typically, I can only speak to Sandusky, but I assume it's true across the state. We would have had some juniors that would have been registering for a June retest, just to really utilize that experience of the SAT and probably using some Khan Academy to do a little bit of personalized remediation to boost their scores back up. Ted spoke to it earlier. We do understand that colleges are going to give some flexibility with college entrance exams when it comes to admittance. But when I look at, with what I think I know about scholarships and then placement decisions, I want my son to be eligible for any and all scholarships that he possibly can be eligible for. And it's one thing for colleges to waive the admission, the college entrance exam is the admission component, but what will their own financial aid look like? What will outside scholarships look like? Will they be waiving that? Will they even know, the outside groups, will they even know that that's something that they might have to consider? And then the last thing I would want for my son, or I'd want for any of our students, would be to have to enroll in some like zero level class that's going to cost them money, but it's not going to bear credit. Not because they require that based on their achievement, but because they don't have an SAT score to prove that, hey, they're good to go for English 101 or Math 112, whatever that might be.
So, what are you thinking about doing with 8th graders, Steve? I know that in the past, Sandusky has done some fall testing and spring testing. So what would you be thinking about that for this year?
Our normal testing protocol in the spring is to include the 7th grade. And we were including 8th grade, and I say include 7th grade. We have been giving the PSAT 8-9 to our 7th and 8th graders ever since Michigan switched to College Board for the SAT as the college entrance exam. That was part of the MME. So our normal protocol has been to test grades 7 through 11. Like I said, we value that data. We kind of look at SAT as sort of the end goal for our students. And so the earlier we can start to get some of that data, and the earlier the students can kind of get acclimated to, the style of test, we think the better. Looking at all factors, right now, I am not probably going to want to test my 7th or 8th graders in the fall. We certainly expect that by spring we will return to our full 7-11 testing protocol with College Board assessments. Part of this is a financial decision. The state's not going to pay to test the 8th graders, and we know we're facing budget cuts. And I hope that my district can continue to provide funding to test the 7th graders in the spring. So if I'm in a place, and I'm sure I am right now, even if I'm not being told so specifically, if I'm in a place where I need to make budgetary decisions, then that would be for me a budgetary decision that I probably would not seek to have the district pay for my 8th graders to test. But knowing that they will be testing in the spring. So we'll be utilizing local assessments for our 7th and 8th graders to help us determine, where their slide has landed them, so to speak.
Well, this might be a good time, you referencing slide a couple of times to think about that Khan Academy piece. And I also know, obviously, in Sandusky, you guys have done an amazing job of helping students to connect their College Board and their Khan Academy accounts. And after we're done, Steve, I'd like Erin to talk a little bit more from that teacher perspective about Khan. But can you just tell us, how, at what grade level and what timeline do you have kids connecting those accounts, and how would that impact your fall?
We start in 9th grade, and in 9th grade and 10th grade in the spring of students' 9th and 10th grade years, we start the process of getting those accounts linked. We don't do it before then, and we want to be mindful of making sure that we're utilizing the College Board Khan connection to its full impact. And we feel starting in 9th grade and then making sure, double assure in 10th grade we've got everybody in is how we handle it. So that was a thing that we didn't get to this year. So that will be something that we'll want to prioritize in the fall. Exactly what that will look like is obviously very hard to say, but we will make the effort to have the College Board Khan accounts linked prior to these test dates.
Great. So Erin, we'd like to bring you in now, if you don't mind. So I know that, you have done absolutely tremendous work utilizing Khan Academy, both for SAT prep and integrating, Khan Academy lessons and things into your classroom. So from a classroom teacher's perspective, a lot of people are saying, are we required to fall test? And, I don't feel like that's, appropriate for my students. They're going to be coming back after a pretty, traumatic experience and things of that nature. And I know one of the things that I've always said, in all the years of data workshops that I've run about testing is, I always say, what are you going to do with the data, And if you're not utilizing your data, then I think that really has a huge impact on whether or not testing is valuable. So I thought maybe it would just be helpful, from a fall testing perspective, for you to be able to get those results back. How do you see yourself being able to utilize those fall testing results? And this year is going to be a little bit different too, because we're talking about tests that have released items. So maybe you can kind of walk through that a little bit.
Yeah, it is going to be very different, especially for me because I'm a junior English teacher. So I won't see all of these students on a daily basis like I'm used to. So it will be a little bit trickier for me to kind of get back into giving them the resources that they need to prepare for this. But I think for the fall testing, for us, the earlier, the better. I know that there will be there will be a lot of people thinking, well, is that too early? Will they be ready for that at that point? I've got a lot of thoughts in my head right now about how I'm going to approach even before the school year starts to help get my past juniors prepared for this. But getting those results back, the sooner the better, just because there has been so much lag time, and to see where the kids are again, and then use their individualized practice through Khan to get themselves ready if they do need to have another retake. And having those results back in October, and I'm not sure if Ted pointed this out, but there will be monthly makeup days available in the fall. So having those results back in October, and potentially that kid will have the chance to do a retake in November, and then have so many more opportunities for the scholarships, admissions, financial aid decisions that have to take place. So for us, I welcome the fall test because I know so many of my kids, they need this little push. They need that barrier released for them because they maybe don't have vehicles to drive to a Saturday testing site, So with the state coming in and saying, yes, we will give your school the ability to test everyone for free, that just eliminates so many barriers for my kids. And I know we have a lot of kids that would opt out if they could, but those are some of the kids that I know that they can get a great score, which will open doors for them that they didn't even know they had. So I think this fall testing is crucial for the kids and the schools.
So let's talk a little bit about the reports that are going to be available this year. As many people know now, we've talked about this many times, that with spring testing, we were going to be losing the QAR report where you actually get to see the item. So what is that going to look like for the fall?
I don't know if I don't think Ted talked about it on here either, but the College Board has released there is a question portal that is now available for the all questions, PSAT through SAT. So we normally use the College Board portal to see the question analysis, and I use that frequently to get an idea of where my kids are at. So we will have that correct this fall, but not for next fall. So I will still continue to use that this fall to get an idea of helping kids kind of individualize where they're going from here. But know that I am shifting toward having to look for other resources like the College Board portal of questions to make some individualized decisions for each kid.
Yeah, Wendy, it's a great question, and Erin's spot on there. So remember that in this spring of 2020, the grades 8, 9, and 10 tests were not going to be released forms. And so the QAR was going to look very different for spring testing results. And SAT in the spring of 2020 was scheduled to be a released form. So the QAR would have remained the same for the SAT in spring. However, that changes with fall testing. With fall testing, PSAT 8, 9, and PSAT NMSQT are released forms. So for grades 9, 10, and 11 that test in the fall, the question analysis report will have the item level data, and you will be able to actually click through to the item and see the percentage of students that answered each answer choice. SAT in the fall is not a release form, so you won't get that information on the 12th grade students. And then once we flip to spring, we'll go back to non-release forms for grades 8, 9, and 10, and then a release form for the SAT in grade 11. But Erin also pointed out we have just launched our new SAT Suite question bank. And so that's a resource that folks can use to develop practice resources along with Khan Academy. And these are all official items from PSAT 8, 9, all the way up through SAT, over 3,500 questions in the question bank, searchable. So you can actually tailor quite a customized program for students depending on what their score information is.
We obviously, with everything that administrators and teachers have had on their plates, we just haven't rolled out anything about the question bank except to just put a blurb in our, updates that it's there, it's available. But we just, I feel like there's just so much going on right now that people, it's like something that's not even on their minds. And obviously, even to a certain degree with everything we're talking about today. And this is all like, for so many people who are stressed right now. My thinking was, I know this isn't stuff that everybody wants to be thinking about necessarily, but, any information that we have and that we just need to have in the back of our heads that is available or thinking forward about, I'm hoping that at least just having that information will just, have people more pieces of the puzzle that they can put back together, when it is an appropriate time for them to think about it. So, Erin, I know that you have already, looked at the question bank and thought about ways that you might want to use that. Do you have maybe any thoughts that you just want to share about, kind of the benefits of, I think there's still some people that maybe don't realize that with Khan official SAT practice isn't just linking the accounts and having that individualized remediation. that there's lesson plans and quizzes and all kinds of things that are built within that. And then we have this new resource now with the item bank. And so there's so many, great pieces out there to help prepare kids. And, another thing Erin and I have always agreed about is it's not just about, test prep for the sake of test prep. It's actually skill building. And so I don't know, Erin, if you just want to share some thoughts about those other pieces that you use.
And you're right, Wendy, all of these resources that are available, and really, in Michigan, these are all free resources that are available to us. So I do think that it's a disservice to our kids if we're not sharing these resources with them because they're so individualized to every student. So I have plans right now, kind of in the back of my head, I've already created a Google Classroom where all of my juniors that I had last year, which is every junior in our school, luckily for me, where I will offer them a 6-week course before the school year starts, sharing out just reminders about the things that they can be doing on Khan Academy. Because, as a parent as well, we can tell the kids what they should be doing, but unless we're really directing them to the exact resources, they're not going to go there on their own. Some of them will, but the majority of them will not. So using Khan and the lessons that are already on Khan, and all of the linking that the kids have been able to do, and they can go on Khan and do another diagnostic test right on there to see where they are now compared to where they were in the spring to get a new individualized plan. So I think for me, it's going to be directing the kids to do that again as we get closer to the fall, to just remind themselves where they're at and utilize those things that are on Khan, but I will be doing a lot of directing them through that process. So I think that's an important piece. And then, just giving them everything that I can, getting them as prepared as they can be. And I know that Khan does get a lot of, this is test prep, but I will tell you, I have multiple students come back after they've gone to college and just thank me for introducing them to Khan Academy, because that was the only way they got through their college physics class, or that was the only way they got through their college calc class, because they knew of a place where they could go and find videos and find extra lessons. And that was what helped them. So I think that if we're not intentional about giving these resources to the kids, that they're missing out. So I think it's a really important piece that districts should be utilizing.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I just always admired the work that you do and all the resources that you're able to share. And, in the webinars that you run for MASSP, the feedback I've always gotten from teachers is, oh my gosh, I cannot believe she gave away all of that stuff that she's created, because it truly is. It's like, the holy grail of great stuff. And so I appreciate everything you do and your willingness, not just to create that for your own students, but your willingness to share it with everyone else. That's amazing. So before we wrap up here, I don't know if Steve or Ted have any closing thoughts. And if you don't, that's okay. But I just wanted to give you an opportunity.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Wendy, to all of MASSP, all the members and leadership especially. The partnership is so important for us. I mean, so much information gets passed out. I do hope folks, the one caveat I would give about today is that this is the information as of today. Things could change, and if they do, Spotlight is where it'll be put out first, but we will remain in contact with MASSP. We consider this partnership one of our most critical, and I can't thank Steve and Erin enough for the great work that they do and in the forward thinking that they put forth and sharing to other members and other teachers. So just a big thanks from the College Board for all these efforts.
Well, oh, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, sorry, Wendy. Just sort of my closing thoughts are, as I was reading the questions come into the Q&A, I mean, it's obvious there's some angst and maybe even some frustration that this is a thing that we're being asked to think about right now. So as a practicing principal and, a member of the MASSP Board of Directors, I guess my 2 cents are, we need to understand this is coming. We need to understand, the equity piece that's involved in this, especially for the rising seniors. we need to understand the power of the data that we get. And like Wendy had said earlier, if we're not doing anything with the data, then it makes it a little harder to justify the time that you're going to be spending. But if you're doing all that you can with the data, then it certainly makes it a lot more feasible to defend why we're going to spend this time and have kids do this testing when we come back in the fall. But just an understanding for me and how I go about my planning. If I have a plan for what I might do, assuming that we can get all the kids in the building and we don't have to worry too much about social distancing, then at least I've got that ready to go. And the landscape that will be here on September 23rd, when we would hope to test the seniors, obviously it could be a lot different than it is right now. But if I have a plan for now, then I've got something that I can tweak and I can adapt as more information comes forward. And if I don't have a plan, if I've got nothing heading into the school year and I have to sort of create this on the fly, then I feel like that's going to create a lot of stress for me. And I know as principal, if I'm stressed, everybody in the building is going to be stressed. So it would be my recommendation to get some sort of plan together and know that we probably will have to tweak it, but better to tweak a well thought out plan than just have to be scrambling to put something together last minute.
Sage advice to all the grasshoppers out there. So thank you for that, Steve. So if we go back, Ted, sorry, we got a couple of last minute entry questions here. Let's say that we have, we're going to try to do testing on the same day for different grades of students. Could we have students PM testing and then students AM testing?
I don't believe that question's been asked yet at the MDE level. So I will take that to our weekly meeting. And I gave out my email address. If whoever asked that question, you can just send me an email. I'll make sure that I get that question answered, and I'll of course copy you in on the response. I don't know that that's allowable. And I think a part of it will depend upon the number of accommodations for extended time that you might have. So I think that's still up in the air.
Okay. I also had somebody that asked about, pupil accounting and minutes and spring testing time. And I'm kind of shying away from answering that question because I feel like, as we keep circling around, there's a lot of unanswered questions about that right now. So I don't know if you have any general thoughts about it.
That is not a College Board question. That's a MDE pupil accounting question. And it's that hasn't come up in our discussions. We've been so focused on, how we're going to do this and how we're going to operate because it is so very different from the spring. I think everybody who's on this call and who's participated, we're at the point now where we kind of know what we're going to do in the spring. And even in our work with MDE, we tweak, we might need standard error of measure information, or we might provide a little bit different file format. So we tweak, as Steve said, we have a plan for spring testing. So year over year, we might tweak some of that. But this fall testing is brand new and the systems are going to be a little bit different. So we've been focused on that. Pupil accounting, great question, not for me to answer.
All right. Well, we'll have to stay tuned on that one because I really do think that, even I referenced the plan West Bloomfield put out yesterday. There's a lot of pupil accounting questions around a plan like that, let alone how it impacts testing. So I feel like that is going to be a very fluid area and it'll probably wisely not one that we really address today because I think that there's going to be a lot of flux and wouldn't want to provide any misinformation about that. So stay tuned on that one, everyone. So I have one closing slide. Ryan's going to pop up for me. We really appreciate everyone's time today and joining in. And as Ted referenced, we did plan on having a follow-up webinar for ordering of materials. We know that's going to be, kind of another, because it's going to be a different and a new process. So we'll be having another follow-up webinar about that. want to remind you that just coming up this week, again, tomorrow, we have Leader to Leader. And it's going to be a really interesting one because we have middle school separate from high school, and we actually have panels of students. So we have middle school kids and high school kids who are going to be sharing their perspective on how this whole remote learning thing has been working for them. And we're really excited to be able to get their perspective. Last Leader to Leader, we had teachers and counselors. We've already had principals, and then coming up a couple weeks from now, we'll be having superintendents. So it's interesting to get different people's perspective on how things are going and what they're thinking about moving forward. But I can only imagine what the students are going to share. So this will be must-see TV tomorrow. So please join us tomorrow at 1 o'clock and register for that webinar. So thank you so much, Ted, Erin, Steve, for being part of our panel today, and Ryan for always doing awesome behind the scenes work. So thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.